will be our final questioner before we go into the markup. So I would yield now 5 minutes to the gentleman from Washington State, Mr. Inslee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your courtesy. Let me participate. I appreciate it. These are very important things. I want to thank all the panel for being here. These issues and the constellation of issues this represent, with all the problems we've got in the world, from Libya to for gas prices, this one I hear more about. I mean, not necessarily more than some of those others, but a lot about. And I've almost come to think that when people in my district think about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, they think about free access to the internet as either life or liberty or pursuit of happiness, or maybe all three of them. And they really do perceive a threat to that, because certain business plans could result in the loss of their decision making about what they look at on the internet, and losing that ability and that going to some commercial entity instead, or imposing costs on them that aren't necessarily in their benefit. So it is a huge issue in my district. People are very, very concerned about it, and I am as well. And I don't believe the FCC actually went farther enough to guard against the life of that life, liberty, or pursuit of happiness interest, in part because it didn't deal with the wireless spectrum, which is the future. We're really talking about the past or the present here in wired, but wireless is the future, and the fact that we haven't considered protections on that is very disturbing to me. So I just have a couple questions. First off, for Mr. Ciccone, do you think that consumers are the ones that ought to have final say in deciding what content and services they have when they access the internet? And in what ways, if any, does the present order restrict those consumers, if any?
I think by and large, I think we're, the objective of our business is to provide that very access, and it's not our position or policy to hinder it in any way. As I've said before, I don't think we've done that in any way, and I think it's in the interest of our business to make it as broadly available as possible.
And do you think that the FCC's present net neutrality order restricts access of consumers to access they would want in any way?
I don't think so, Mr. Inslee. I'm not sure I'm getting the import of your question. There are provisions in the rule that provide for and allow for reasonable network management, which, I mean, there are certain things you have to do to make sure a network runs properly, and then on shared networks such as cable or wireless, your objective is to ensure the most access for the most people at any given time. And so there could be policies or terms and conditions on the service that are related to the ability to management of that network that could impede that. But I think the Commission has recognized that, and I don't think there's any disagreement that we have with the Commission about the importance of that.
Thank you. Mr. Turner, I want to talk, if I can, about previous frameworks. Isn't it true that non-discrimination really was the agreed upon rule of the game, if you can call it that, during the past few decades, and including during much of this explosive growth due to the internet? And AT&T really agreed to that principle in net neutrality in FCC merger approvals. If that's the truth, and I think it is, what is the reason that the American people should be asked to abide by jettisoning that framework?
Well, I don't think they should, and you raise a great point. I always turn back to the 96 Act because that's the governing law here. The focus of the Act was keeping internet companies like AOL, CompuServe, Prodigy viable. They were dependent on the infrastructure. We had great ISP choice there. Any consumer could choose dozens of ISPs. And there was no way, I think, Congress would have said the FCC should be allowed to invent words like inextricably intertwined to basically take away that choice. I don't think Congress would have wanted in 96 to look out at the world of ISP choice and say, 15 years later, I only want consumers to have choice of two, and I don't want them to be able to choose the content that they would like to access on the internet. I wish this body could return to first principles, return to the principle of non-discrimination. The FCC may not have done it the right way. Let's talk about the right way to do it.
Thank you.
Gentleman concludes his questioning and